Wahlberg stood at the edge of the precinct, his eyes scanning the bustling activity of the officers inside. To an outsider, it was just another day in the department, but for him, the air felt thick with unspoken secrets. A dedicated officer with years of service under his belt, he was known for his unwavering commitment to justice. Colleagues admired his integrity, often turning to him for guidance in tricky situations. Yet beneath the surface of camaraderie lay a growing unease that gnawed at him relentlessly. Corruption had seeped into the very foundation of the force he loved. Wahlberg had seen it manifest in subtle ways, favors exchanged behind closed doors, evidence ignored, and whispers of illicit deals that circulated like shadows in the hallways. He felt increasingly isolated, his idealism clashing with the reality around him. As he sat in his office poring over reports that hinted at foul play, Wahlberg's frustration boiled over. He had fought hard to uphold the law only to watch as others flaunted it without consequence. The weight of disillusionment pressed heavily on his shoulders, and he knew something had to change. Determined to root out the corruption festering within his own department, Wahlberg resolved to take action. Little did he know that this journey would lead him down a path he never anticipated. Wahlberg's resolve to confront the corruption within his department quickly turned into a nightmare. Just days after gathering evidence on suspicious activities, he found himself summoned to internal affairs for what he assumed would be a routine inquiry. Instead, it was a carefully constructed trap. As he entered the sterile conference room, the tension was palpable, the air thick with accusations. Corrupt officers he had once considered friends now sat across from him, their expressions cold and calculating. They presented fabricated evidence and coerced testimonies, painting Wahlberg as a rogue officer involved in questionable dealings. The betrayal stung deeply. His career built on honor was crumbling before his eyes. No longer the valiant officer standing against corruption, he was now the scapegoat for those who wanted him silenced. Wahlberg fought back fiercely, proclaiming his innocence, but the odds were stacked against him. The allegations led to an expedited hearing where colleagues turned adversaries echoed the lies that sealed his fate. In a matter of hours, he was stripped of his badge and authority, cast aside as unfit for service. Devastated yet determined, Wahlberg realized this wasn't just about losing his job. It was about fighting a battle much larger than himself. With newfound clarity, he vowed not to let this unjust dismissal define him or deter his quest for truth, a quest that was just beginning. The days following his dismissal were a blur of anger and despair for Wahlberg. Stripped of his badge, he felt like a phantom haunting the very precinct he once proudly served. Betrayed by those he trusted, the weight of disillusionment crushed him, leaving him grappling with feelings of isolation and helplessness. He spent countless hours replaying the events in his mind, trying to find a way to make sense of it all. Each memory of camaraderie was now tainted by betrayal. Sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, Wahlberg stared at the wall, visions of the badge he had worn for so long hanging above his desk, a constant reminder of what he had lost. The ache in his chest morphed into burning resolve. He could either succumb to bitterness or fight back against the system that sought to destroy him. He chose the latter. Fueled by a desire for justice and vindication, Wahlberg began to organize his thoughts and resources. He started reaching out to former colleagues who still believed in integrity, gathering bits of information and piecing together a plan to unravel the corruption that had targeted him. With each passing day, the disillusionment transformed into a fierce determination. He would not let this defeat define him, but rather become the catalyst for exposing the rot within the department. A new chapter was about to unfold in his quest for truth and redemption. Embracing his newfound resolve, Wahlberg knew that to bring down the corruption within his former department, he needed to operate outside its confines. Armed with his extensive knowledge of police procedures, he began to devise a plan that would require him to tread dangerous waters. Gone was the man who followed protocol. Now he was prepared to bend the rules in his quest for justice. Wahlberg started by revisiting old cases and diving into unsolved files, looking for patterns and connections that others had overlooked. He meticulously pieced together evidence while maintaining a low profile, avoiding any attention that might alert the very officers he aimed to expose. Using disguises and untraceable phones, he reached out to contacts, gathering intel from informants and sympathetic officers still committed to justice. He even covertly surveilled certain precinct activities, using shadows and alleyways to remain undetected. Each piece of information added fuel to his fire, revealing the extent of a criminal network woven throughout the department. The thrill of discovery spurred him on, driving him deeper into a world layered with danger. As Wahlberg navigated this minefield, he felt a mix of exhilaration and peril. Every step forward brought him closer to the truth, but also increased the risk of being caught. He was determined to uncover what lay hidden beneath the badge that had once represented honor, but was now tarnished with betrayal. As Wahlberg continued his investigation, he began to unravel the intricate web of deceit that surrounded his former department. Each new piece of information he uncovered tied seemingly unrelated incidents and officers together, revealing a disturbing pattern of complicity. It was not just a few bad apples. The corruption ran deep, entwined with the very fabric of the force. Using connections with trusted informants and digging through old case files, Wahlberg discovered links between certain officers and organized crime syndicates operating in the city. These officers weren't merely ignoring rules, they were actively facilitating illegal activities, from drug trafficking to extortion. It became evident that they were part of a larger conspiracy designed to protect criminal enterprises while maintaining a facade of lawfulness. Every thread he pulled led him deeper into a world riddled with danger. Wahlberg compiled evidence meticulously, creating charts that mapped relationships and transactions, each connection pointing to an organized network that extended well beyond his initial suspicions. The more he learned, the riskier his situation became. With each revelation, Wahlberg felt both the weight of urgency and the danger lurking just behind him. He knew time was of the essence. He had to expose this conspiracy before it consumed him or allowed any further injustices to occur. The battle for truth was intensifying, and Wahlberg was prepared to face whatever came next. As Wahlberg delved deeper into his investigation, he found himself at a crossroads, feeling the weight of his isolation. However, fortune smiled upon him when he crossed paths with unexpected allies. One evening, while poring over case files in a dimly lit diner, he encountered Sarah, a savvy journalist known for her tenacity in uncovering corruption. Intrigued by his story, she offered her skills to help bring the truth to light. Together, they began to exchange information and strategies, feeding off each other's determination. Sarah's contacts within the media would be crucial for amplifying their evidence and reaching a wider audience. Wahlberg also found solace in the camaraderie of a few honest officers still within the department, individuals who had sensed the growing rot, but felt powerless to act. Among them was Officer Ramirez, who had secretly kept tabs on suspicious activities and provided Wahlberg with critical insights from inside the precinct. The small team formed a tight-knit unit, dedicated to untangling the conspiracy while navigating the dangers that surrounded them. They shared late-night meetings and whispered communications to avoid detection, driven by a shared sense of justice that transcended their previous roles. United in purpose, they realized that together they could challenge the corruption that had nearly destroyed Wahlberg, and perhaps save many others in the process. As Wahlberg and his allies intensified their efforts to expose the corruption within the department, the stakes grew perilously high. Every piece of evidence they gathered brought them closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. Wahlberg could feel the shadows closing in around him. He was no longer just fighting for his own redemption, but also for the safety of those who had chosen to stand alongside him. One night, while meeting with Sarah and Officer Ramirez in a secluded location, they narrowly escaped detection when a patrol car cruised by, its lights scanning the area. The tension was palpable as they quickly packed up their materials and dispersed into the darkness. With each close call, Wahlberg felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with dread. He knew that any misstep could have dire consequences not just for him, but for his allies as well. The corrupt officers, threatened by Wahlberg's investigation, were becoming increasingly aggressive in their tactics. Anonymous threats began to appear, warning him to back off or face severe repercussions. Wahlberg realized he was walking a tightrope. One wrong move could endanger not only his life but also Sarah's and Ramirez's. Despite the mounting pressure and fear, Wahlberg grew more resolute. He understood that exposing this conspiracy required bravery and sacrifice, and he was prepared to protect those who believed in justice at any cost. The fight against the corruption had become a matter of survival, testing their resolve like never before. With the stakes higher than ever, Wahlberg and his allies began to piece together the full extent of the criminal network operating within their police department. As they sifted through incriminating documents and testimonies from informants, a frightening reality emerged. This was not merely petty corruption, but a well-organized operation involving high-ranking officials engaging in bribery, drug trafficking, and abuse of power. Through coordinated efforts with Sarah and Officer Ramirez, Wahlberg uncovered specific instances where officers were not just turning a blind eye to illegal activities but were actively complicit in orchestrating them. Conversations recorded on hidden devices revealed meetings between corrupt officers and known criminals, where illicit deals were made under the guise of legitimate operations. As he compiled evidence, transaction records, phone logs, and testimonies, Wahlberg felt the weight of each revelation sinking in. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became that this network operated with impunity, protected by a culture of silence that thrived on fear and intimidation. Each new discovery brought fresh urgency. Wahlberg realized that not only was the department compromised, but it had penetrated neighborhoods across the city, putting innocent lives at risk. The darkness surrounding him felt suffocating yet exhilarating. This was more than just exposing wrongdoing. It was about dismantling an entire system built on corruption. Resolute, Wahlberg knew he had to connect all these pieces and act before it was too late. Not just for himself, but for those who depended on true justice being served. The time for subtlety had passed. Wahlberg knew he had to confront the corrupt officers directly. With incriminating evidence in hand, he coordinated a daring meeting at an abandoned warehouse, where some of the key figures of the network were known to gather. His heart raced as he stepped into the shadows, flanked by Sarah and Officer Ramirez, both ready to back him up, but acutely aware of the potential fallout. As tensions escalated, Wahlberg faced off against his former colleagues who had betrayed him. The confrontation was charged with raw emotions. Betrayal, anger, and desperation crackled in the air like static electricity. He laid out his findings, exposing their web of deceit and corruption in front of them. "You think you can operate without consequences?" he challenged, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The response was immediate. They scoffed at his claims, attempting to belittle him and dismiss his evidence as mere hearsay. But Wahlberg stood firm, drawing on every ounce of courage and determination he had gathered throughout this ordeal. As accusations flew back and forth, it became clear that this confrontation would not only test his resolve, but also his moral compass. Would he be willing to push back against people he once called friends? In that tumultuous moment it became apparent. Exposing the truth came with a price, one that might force Wahlberg to weigh justice against loyalty profoundly. In the wake of the confrontation, Wahlberg felt a renewed sense of purpose. The evidence he had meticulously gathered began to crystallize into a coherent narrative, revealing the full extent of corruption within the department. Driven by urgency, he convened a meeting with Sarah and Officer Ramirez, determined to take the next critical step, initiating an internal investigation. They worked tirelessly to compile a comprehensive dossier outlining the connections between corrupt officers and organized crime, complete with records of illegal transactions and testimonies from informants. As they finalized their findings, Wahlberg's heart raced. This was not just a collection of data, but a lifeline for justice that could awaken the dormant integrity within the department. With their evidence in hand, Wahlberg arranged to meet with an internal affairs investigator, known for her dedication to cleaning up the force. He knew this meeting held the potential to shift the tide, but it also carried immense risk. If word got out about his activities, it could jeopardize everything he had worked for, and put his allies in peril. As he presented his findings, Wahlberg watched as the investigator's expression shifted from skepticism to concern, realizing the gravity of what lay before her. This pivotal moment was not merely about exposing wrongdoing. It was a chance to restore faith in law enforcement and protect innocent lives at risk. Wahlberg understood that their actions could spark a movement to reclaim justice from those who had perverted it for far too long. As Wahlberg prepared to present the evidence to internal affairs, he found himself grappling with a profound internal conflict. Was he truly seeking justice, or merely indulging in the desire for revenge against those who had wronged him? The line between the two had become increasingly blurred as the stakes rose. He reflected on the humiliation of his dismissal and the betrayal by officers he once considered friends, their faces haunting him in moments of quiet reflection. He was driven by a sense of duty to expose the corruption that had infiltrated the department, wanting to protect innocent lives from further harm. Yet, Simmering beneath that noble cause lay a darker impulse, a yearning for retribution against those who had orchestrated his downfall. Was this quest for truth tainted by personal vendetta? Wahlberg understood that if he allowed his motivations to become muddied by vengeance, it could jeopardize not only his mission, but also the safety of his allies. He needed to channel his anger into righteous action rather than vengeful fury. As he steeled himself for the meeting with the investigator, Wahlberg resolved to focus on justice, not just for himself, but for every individual affected by the corruption within the force. This was about restoring integrity and ensuring that no one else would suffer as he had. Ultimately, he recognized that true justice transcended personal grievances. It required unwavering moral clarity and commitment to a greater cause. The tension in the air was palpable as Wahlberg prepared for the ultimate showdown with the corrupt officials who had orchestrated his downfall. Armed with the evidence that could dismantle their operations, he stood at a crossroads, facing not only the adversaries who had betrayed him, but his own moral compass. The warehouse where they met echoed with the weight of unresolved conflicts and unspoken truths. As they faced off, Wahlberg could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, igniting both his fear and determination. The corrupt officers sneered at his accusations, attempting to twist the narrative in their favor. They were powerful figures within the department, used to operating without consequence. But Wahlberg was no longer the sidelined officer they once knew. He was a man on a mission, prepared to expose their tyranny. Yet as the confrontation escalated and tempers flared, Wahlberg felt the seductive pull of vengeance creeping into his thoughts. With each taunt and every threat thrown his way, he grappled with an intense desire to retaliate. However, he also recognized that descending into vigilantism would undermine everything he stood for. This was about justice, not revenge. In that moment of clarity, Wahlberg made his choice. He would uphold his principles and let the truth be his weapon. The fight might not come without sacrifice, but he understood that true resolution lay in restoring honor and integrity within the force, paving the way for justice to prevail against those who had long evaded it. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Wahlberg faced a whirlwind of consequences from both his actions and those within the department. The internal investigation he helped initiate sent shockwaves through the precinct, leading to arrests and an unsettling yet necessary disruption of the status quo. As reports emerged detailing the corruption wrought by his former colleagues, Wahlberg found himself reflecting on the blurred lines he had traversed in his quest for justice. While he had successfully exposed criminal activities, he was also confronted with the fallout. His name was now associated with a scandal that implicated not just rogue officers but cast shadows on the entire department he once revered. The realization settled heavily on him. In aiming to do what was right, he had placed himself at odds not only with his former friends, but also with a system that thrived on loyalty over truth. As praise from some quarters conflicted with scorn from others, Wahlberg wrestled with feelings of isolation and doubt. Was he truly a champion of justice, or had he inadvertently become a watchman for chaos? With his badge stripped away and numerous threats looming, he recognized that true integrity required an ongoing examination of motives and an unwavering commitment to accountability. This journey was far from over. It had transformed into a relentless pursuit of meaning amid moral ambiguity, testing his strength and resolve like never before. Ultimately, Wahlberg's journey, though marked by personal sacrifices and the loss of his badge, underscores the vital importance of accountability within law enforcement. As he stands on the precipice of a new chapter in his life, he reflects on the challenges he faced, realizing that navigating the complex landscape of justice is never black and white. While he exposed a criminal network and initiated crucial reforms within the department, Wahlberg also recognized the residual scars left by betrayal and conflict. No longer just an officer driven by duty, he had evolved into a symbol of resilience and moral courage. His actions prompted broader discussions about ethics in policing, forcing both the public and his former colleagues to confront uncomfortable truths about their roles in perpetuating corruption. As he steps away from the badge, Wahlberg understands that true justice demands more than just exposing wrongdoing. It requires a collective commitment to uphold ethical standards by every member of law enforcement. This journey has left readers questioning what justice truly looks like in an imperfect system. Wahlberg may no longer wear a badge, but his pursuit of righteousness continues as he advocates for transparency and integrity in policing. In doing so, he embodies the hope that change is possible when individuals choose to stand against the tide of corruption.